I'm Dr. Mark Musey, philosopher, professor of religious studies. I'm with my friend Dr. Manoj Jain, a physician and columnist for the Washington Post. We've been talking about mindfulness and meditation and how these two ideas are related to one another and yet different. We're going to continue that conversation today by talking about meditation. And in your presentation, Manoj, one of the things that you note is that the practice of meditation, and it's not always called that, but we can identify throughout human history certain things that are akin to what we today call meditation. But yet we see that it's very ancient and widespread practice, and that's usually associated with spirituality and religion.
Yes, you're a professor of religious studies, you're a philosopher. You've seen the practice of meditation evolve or shape religions and how religions have been shaped by this practice. Tell us a little bit about how you see meditation in these various traditions.
Okay, well, that's a very interesting and complicated question. When I was doing my training in graduate school, most of the focus of my study was on ideas, on the way people thought about human life, the meaning of life, the nature of ultimate reality, all the philosophical questions that we tend to ask. There was some point in my journey as a graduate student that I became more interested not so much in what people thought, but what they did. That is, the kinds of practices that they engaged in that helped them to relate to the ideas that they had about the nature of life and ultimate reality.
So I really like this concept that you're differentiating between academic thought and then practices. And then practices can be of two types. One can be ritualistic practices. The other can be experiential practices.
Well, exactly right. In fact, one of the problems I have with the way we academics tend to study religion is that we tend to focus on ideas and doctrines and beliefs. And the problem with that is that that's not the way most religious and spiritual people live their lives.
Right.
Doctrine, belief, ideas, thoughts probably play a lesser role in the actual spiritual life of most human beings than most academics would like to acknowledge.
Yeah.
Part of this is because most academics live their lives in their heads, and we spend a lot of time, thinking ideas and having thoughts. So it's quite natural that that's what we're going to focus on. So as I was undergoing my own graduate work, I began to realize that thoughts and doctrines and beliefs were not quite as important as I had once believed. And so I decided to take it upon myself to go to various places where religions are actually practiced to see what the exercises, the disciplines, the pragmatic values of religious traditions actually were. And that's what first took me to India. And that's where I learned meditation for the first time. So it wasn't anything I learned in graduate school or in the academic study of religion. It was something that I had to go see for myself and learn to practice. And it was there that I began to appreciate the great richness and the wide range of meditation techniques.
Yeah. So you talked about how you learned meditation. I want to share with you how I learned meditation. I was born also in India, and my grandmother and others would wake up very early in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, and they would be sitting in a corner of the room and quietly, nothing, but wide awake. Didn't think much of it. And then when I was here in America as a child, we used to go to upstate New York to a yoga camp. And I began to hear and learn more about meditation. It became part of my culture. And then it was during high school when my brother started to practice yoga and meditation. And he taught me the practice of meditation. And slowly in college and afterwards, I took it upon myself to practice more. But it was really when I began my medical practice and talking to patients that I realized the true benefit. And recently in the Washington Post, I wrote a piece about how mindfulness changes us.
That's very interesting. What was the kind of meditation that you started practicing?
So we started with chanting meditation. So that was what at the yoga camp we did. And then my brother was more in guided meditation. And that was really helpful. And I think guided meditation works well.
I think it does too.
And what's also important to know that there are thousands of types of meditations. Tell us a little bit about the meditations from the Eastern and the Western traditions.
Well, the first form of meditation that I began to practice when I had gone to India to study meditation was what's called Vipassana, which means insight meditation. And it's the form of meditation that focuses principally on the breath. So just as one can chant or one can have a guided meditation, there's a form of meditation that simply focuses upon observing the breathing. So that was the kind of meditation I began to practice. And there are actually many different kinds of Vipassana meditation. And so to that, I added things like walking meditation and meditation as you're lying down. And then I began to really expand and study practices such as Zen meditation, which is a form of meditation that is similar to Vipassana because it focuses on the breath, but there are also forms of Zen that focus upon what are called koans, little phrases or riddles that a lot of people have heard of, like what's the sound of one hand clapping, these sorts of things. So I practiced a little bit of that. I tried some Tibetan meditation where your goal is to focus and visualize a kind of image of an ideal guru or even the Buddha himself, and try to inculcate the qualities that you observe in that visualization. So the important point of that experience was I was exposed to a wide range of techniques and skills, and began to appreciate just how diverse meditation really is, not only as an ancient discipline, but worldwide, practiced by many different human beings.
Meditation is also in the Western traditions, as in contemplative prayer and so forth.
Well, I'm glad you bring that out because it took me a trip to India before I realized that many of the things that I was seeking in terms of spiritual practice on the other side of the world, I could find right here in the Western traditions in which I grew up. It's just that those traditions tend to submerge the practices of mindfulness and meditation, and they're not as apparent as they are in the other traditions.
So mindfulness and meditation took a new twist in the 1960s. And this is really important for people to know that prior to the 1950s, 1960s, people thought that, scientists thought, I should really say, that meditation was just some fringe practice, that it had no impact on the body, it had no impact on the mind. It was just any ritual that someone was doing.
Well, that brings up the question that your presentation raises for me, which is why did scientists begin to study this spiritual practice that had been so long associated with religion?
Sure. Well, it may be one thing is that a lot of people started taking it up. As you remember, in the 1960s, the hippie generation, 60s, 70s, people were taking on and using meditation. And it made scientists wonder. And in fact, it made one scientist take a group of Tibetan monks into his lab and explore. So Herbert Benson did that. And other scientists began to do functional MRI imaging of the brain. And the Dalai Lama conducted a conference on mindfulness and meditation with a group of neuroscientists. Just imagine that. Yeah. A spiritual leader bringing in a group of scientists, neuroscientists for that matter, and asking them questions and answering questions, and having a group of monks sitting in the laboratory with scanners on. So it has revolutionized our thinking, the biology, the chemistry, as well as the physiology of the human body and how it's impacted by meditation. So popularity, and also what the research findings are showing is that there is a benefit, that there is a physical and the biological benefit to meditation. Also, there's an economical benefit. A number of studies have shown that if we use meditation as therapy, it reduces the cost of care.
Oh, very interesting. Well, that sort of anticipates one of the other questions that I had, which was when Benson and some of the other scientists who began studying meditation from a scientific perspective began their work, how were they received by the scientific community? I mean, I can't imagine, science is really quite conservative despite what we sometimes think, but it's a slow-moving discipline, and that's part of the nature of what it is. How was Benson received when
with
he
a
did
great
this work?
deal of skepticism, and many scientists then, and a lot less now, but still some now, do not approve of scientific research being done on practices such as mindfulness and meditation. I think that's wrong. I think we genuinely need to put the practice of meditation on the same level as a practice of exercise as well as medication. So we can have clinical trials on a medication and meditation and see which one performs better. And for certain illnesses, maybe mild depression, anxiety, meditation does darn well.
Well, so perhaps do you think that some of the apprehension of the scientific community towards the examination and use of meditation has to do with its association with religion and spirituality?
Well, I think that has something to do with it. But what scientists have to keep in mind is actually they have to keep an open mind.
Yeah.
Even if it comes from a religious tradition or if it's coming from a empirical data, it's valuable information that they should utilize if it helps people feel better, achieve a sense of well-being, happiness. So I think mindfulness and meditation helps us achieve that.
Well, thanks, Manoj. I think this is a good point at which to end, because in our next conversations, we're going to be talking a little bit more about how meditation is categorized, and part of the reason we undergo a categorization of meditation is because it helps us to study it scientifically, and I know you'll have more to say about that. So I hope you'll join us for those conversations.